I can intro myself a bit. If those of you who know me, those of you who I haven't met yet, I spent a lot of time in sort of web and CMS world as the co-founder of Gatsby. More recently, we sold Gatsby in 2023 to Netlify. We got to a few million ARR, and then we sold the company to Netlify. And then I've kind of moved over to AI agent world. So I'm now the co-founder of Mastra, which is a TypeScript framework for building AI agents. And sort of like pertinently to this call, I'm the author of Principles of Building AI Agents, which is a book about kind of the basics of how to do that, and it covers a lot of the topics. So like agents and workflows, tools, memory, RAG, evals, tracing. So, maybe you've heard of some of these things, or you're just kind of curious. I'm happy to talk about the book, to the journey from Gatsby, wherever, the open source JavaScript world, wherever folks want to dive in, I guess, but I mean, I'll kind of kick it over to you, Giannis, to start the cues, and then I can give the gaze, and, we'll go from there.
I know we have a very good mixed bag of participants here, some working actively with AI agents, for example, Bill Rogers at AI123C, but we also have some here who might just be dipping their toes and have heard about LLM and, of course, ChatGPT and this AI agent thing. But why don't we, I love these book launches, but why don't we start with like what's in the book? Copy right there, Sam. Perhaps you can show it to us and then just tell us a little bit about the outline of the book.
So the way that we sort of like, I mean, maybe I'll give some backstory as well of sort of like why we decided to write it. So the short version of the story was, we were kind of, again, like Master is a TypeScript framework for building agents, and like, agents are kind of, things that we can build that sort of are part of our developer infrastructure that can, make our applications more AI powered, right? And there's a lot of different definitions of that, but I'll just sort of use that one. And we ended up doing a lot of whiteboarding sessions with people that were trying to build agents, and we just realized that there was like a lot of knowledge that we were accumulating from these conversations that, we could sort of share it each time, but like we felt that it was, more sort of maybe scalable to put it in a book and kind of share it out. So some of the things that are in the book, we have like, we kind of just talk about the different providers, different models, prompting. Then we talk about like agents and sort of like the core agent loop, where you just kind of like, we talk about workflows, which is, kind of like a structured graph-based approach to using LLMs, and you kind of use agents. Often you'll use agents and workflows together when you're building your AI applications. We talk about tools, which are just functions that agents use. We talk about memory, which is sort of like how your agent kind of searches the message history to find relevant information, and provide it in the context. If you've heard this term context engineering, that's becoming more and more popular. Memory is a lot about context engineering. And then let's see. So then we talk about sort of how do you help your agents kind of do the right thing and see what they're doing. So, we call that like agent observability. So the topics there are like tracing, which is sort of just the sort of the raw exhaust of what your agents are doing, as well as evals, which are these kind of structured tests that you can write for your agents to test that they're doing the right things that you're sort of expecting, and kind of you can quantify their outputs on any number of different axes and sort of score them. And then we just kind of do the normal chapter N-1 thing, which is we talk about what's next. And what could be coming for the for the world of AI engineering and agents. So but that's a bit of an intro to what's in here.
And it's already in the second edition, right?
Yeah, so I think I have a over under on 4.5 editions by Christmas. The thing that might screw that one up is that like I think we might write another book or two along the way. It's kind of a different, it's almost like a CI/CD, continuous delivery approach to writing a book. And luckily, like Amazon has made that pretty easy with KDP, their sort of book publishing service. Whenever we just sort of like whenever more things happen, like so we wrote the first edition in sort of late February, so we could hand out copies at YC Demo Day in March, and then we wrote the second edition in May. And between March and May, there were like MCP happened basically. So we wrote a whole new section on MCP. We also wrote a chapter on like agentic RAG. There's always like I think we wrote the first edition was 91 pages. The second edition is 143 or 144.
Wow. Like if we were meeting around a fire chat for a book launch, if you want, you can feel free to ask questions, raise your hand. I'll do my very best to moderate. I'm a big fan of these printed books. I have a previous one of Sam right here, and I think that's just a few years old, right?
Yeah, and you can see it. The same designer made the cover, so similar sort of layout, but it worked last time. We figured we'd just do it again.
I think that's absolutely great. Let's see if anybody has any questions, or we can talk more about what's in the book. We can talk more about the process of writing the book, which is interesting, but I think what might also be interesting to some is the promotion of the book, where I think you're taking a quite interesting approach of giving the book away for free, essentially, right, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, like we can, we print about 1,500 copies a week or so, and then there's a lot of AI meetups here in the SF Bay area, and we will just go to all the AI meetups and basically hand out copies for free. And then we see kind of like people posting on LinkedIn or Twitter, X about the book. And the book is kind of 80% kind of explanatory, sort of like I'm just opening it up and you can see some like diagrams, and then it's like about 20% code samples. So let me like find here's the code sample, and so for the code samples we're using Mastra because all of the concepts in the book you can build with Mastra. Mastra is an open source agent framework, right? So like this one, for example, like you can see like the memory. In some ways, like you can view the book as like a loss leader for our framework, right? Which in true open source fashion is kind of a loss leader for the cloud. But like I think like one of the things that's like really I think that like doing really good marketing is all about doing something that's really unique and stands out. I happen to just be like good at like writing quickly and explaining things, and so so we spent a lot of time in effort just writing the book, and because we like nobody else is doing it, and more broadly, like this is the point in the market where developer education is really the game to be playing. I mean, it's like we just love this stuff, and honestly, we would instinctively do it even if it wasn't sort of the strategically right thing to do. But like we just really care deeply about this stuff. My co-founder Shane like he did a startup once where he was like summer camp for like high school kids or whatever. Like he just cares about like teaching people stuff. But like it's just like because everybody's learning like right now, like what is an agent, what is a workflow, what is agent memory, what are tool calls, like the whole market is in this whole Sam Altman and Greg Brockman and etc. are over there saying, well, 2025 is the year of agents, which is very true. 2025 is the year of agents. And everyone's next question is, of course, well, what is an agent and how do I build one? Or like then we're like, well, we'll answer that question. Anyway, let's back over to you, Jonas.
Very good. I was thinking again, if anybody wants to chime in, there is a lot of hype at the moment on agents, so I think it's really valuable that we're beginning to finally also have some books and some education on the area. Like you said, going from first to second edition from February to May, MCP happened, and I think this is how many of these presentations go. It's kind of reminding us all how quickly this is moving. But I feel like also in reading the digital version, because I don't have the printed yet, that there's quite a few things in both the first and the second edition which will stand the test of a little bit longer time.
Yeah,
because these are more
the way that I see that, and I see Joyce's raised her hands. I want to go over quickly to you after I say this, but like, the way I see this is it's sort of like layers of sedimentary rock, right? Like you might have one kind of layer and then there's like another layer on top of it, and you can like measure the geological time of the mountain or whatever by like which layer was when. And like if we rewind back a couple of years, like most of the people doing AI were doing like various types of machine learning in Python. This is lots of matrix multiplication.
Pleasure.
Oh, excuse me. There's lots of types of matrix multiplication. Then like sort of the models got better and better, and right now a lot of that is sitting behind the model APIs, and so a lot of the work is essentially on top of the model APIs. And so it's much more amenable to TypeScript and so on. And so now we're working here and we're learning about people are learning about prompting and workflows. Maybe there'll be like layers on top of this that like sort of like come in the future. You could see MCP as a layer on top of like tools or whatever, right? But like I think it's not that the stuff on bottom becomes like less relevant. It's just that like there just keeps being more things added to the stack.
Yes, so let's jump to Montreal, where some of us will travel to quite soon for CMS Connect. Joyce, thank you for having us soon, and yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Jonas, and thanks, Sam. There's a lot of conversation around agentic AI at our university right now. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, for us to be able to improve the experiences of our audiences. But the question I work in an area of content governance and governance. And I think one of the questions I have is we have a big content governance problem. I think it's fantastic that we have this opportunity to easily serve our audiences, but if the content isn't accurate or reliable, I think that's the big question that we have. We don't do this very effectively now, and I'm wondering if there is opportunity in agentic AI to help us address some of these problems with ensuring that people are getting answers that are the actual correct answers, because in our data there's a lot of incorrect answers that are floating around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting in that, maybe it's always the case that whenever there's like a new technology, we sort of figure out how to have it produce a lot of things first, and then we kind of like afterwards we start thinking, to your point, like a little bit later we start, well, gosh, like how do we make sure this stuff is correct or accurate or right or whatever. Like I think this is one way of thinking, like I guess like if I rewind back, like I think like one way of thinking about generative AI just broadly is like, if we think about sort of like Google and the algorithmic web and stuff, like there's a lot of like SEO type articles that sort of have like popped up, hey, what are the best hotels in Berlin or whatever, that like are also sort of like, there's just bad articles, right? Like it's like or sort of like or not. Like, there's a lot of low quality content, and then Google started like improving their like SEO filters, and then like to some degree you started forcing like this started causing the creation of like higher quality articles rather than just kind of like human generated slop. Now we kind of like have like AI that can generate a lot of content, and so like the challenge is, well, how do we get how do we get AI to generate high quality articles rather than slop? And I think like again, it's like the generation comes first. Like people figure out the governance a little bit later. Some of the tools that like we see people using are kind of like LLM is one of the things when people talk about evals is this concept of like LLM as judge, which is that you can just have an agent or an LLM kind of like evaluate all your content and be like, what is kind of like accurate, and then like what is and the sort of the challenge is often like sometimes, I mean, it depends whether you're evaluating human written content or AI written content. And then like there are certain techniques that you can use to like get AI to sort of detect AI generated content and kind of say, hey, we don't want AI generated content. And often you sort of need to prompt it with some examples of like what content looks like, what good content looks like. This is kind of called like few shot prompting, where you sort of give a lot of these terms. I think this is also, sorry, like just a general note. One of the reasons that like I wrote the book is that there's a lot of these like words and phrases that like, are just like very kind of weird that people use. So it's like I think like few shot prompting. What is few shot prompting? That sounds really hard. Oh, it just means you give the you just write 2 or 3 examples, like this is like a good example, this is a bad example, this is a good example, this is a bad example. It's like a rubric that you would give a TA, right? Like it's the same thing, but like few shot prompting sounds like, you know, harder or whatever, but it's really just the same thing. And if you give the model kind of like a rubric of how to grade content, then like it can grade content fairly well generally if you use a better model. Hopefully that answered your question, Joyce. I don't know if I went on too far of a tangent.
It does. Thank you for that response. And I will say I would love, I think there is opportunity in these AI tools to help improve our governance aspects as well. And I would love to see that happen at some point. I'm hearing it's not quite there yet, but I think for me, that would be the kind of pie in the sky experience of the progression of these technologies. So,
Yeah.
so thank you for really nice.
No, for sure. And I think like my kind of like phrase for everybody is like, look, if 2025 is the year of agents, like 2026 is going to be the year of sort of evals and governance and this kind of thing. Like I think some of this stuff takes time. I'm optimistic that like we can even see this in our own community. We can see it around us that people are thinking, we're thinking a lot more about this stuff than they were like 5 months ago. And I think they'll be thinking a lot more about it in 5 months from now.
Very good. That's cool. So we covered governance as well, Joyce. Thanks for that. Any other comments, questions? I do think there's a really good point there, Sam, on the definition of these things, because these terms, even just AI agents, gets thrown around. Yeah. And so I think for that alone, it's also super helpful to have a book help us with some education, saying here's what it means, at least to you and in this context.
Yeah, I mean, there's something if we look at like how the field evolved, right? It was a very, you know, academic field for a long time, you know, machine learning and such. And so a lot of the terms like evolved in academia separate from software engineering or, you know, software in general. And so you just end up with these duplicate terms like few shot prompts instead of like, you know, hey, like a few examples, or like evals instead of like tests. And it can be confusing for a newcomer because it's almost like, you know, but then you realize that like most of the terms just have like fairly straightforward translations, and hopefully the book helps in that process. Eric, it's a good to see old friends here.
Yes, my friend Sam. You and I've talked about transformation and working with executive leadership. My question is, you know, the term agents often, when you're talking about, you know, large scale enterprise transformations, executives will say, oh, well, an agent, will that help me get rid of workers, right? And part of this as well, you know, words like companion or agents are meant to be an extension of what you do. Well, what's your point of view? And did you write about this kind of notion of, you know, where a lot of executives or executive leadership teams are of like, look, AI is a good way of reducing headcount, and having agents, you know, basically replace or automate headcount.
Yeah.
Can you comment on kind of that notion of an agent really is meant to augment versus replace?
Yeah, I talk about this a little. I mean, I think like first off, there's like, you know, there's different form factors. So like when you say an agent, that's usually like there's different like levels of autonomy where it's like operating, you know, sort of independently versus it's kind of more of an assistant where it's like you could imagine like an analyst doing some sort of like fraud detection or whatever, and like, you know, you likely want a human in the loop at the end of it, but maybe the agent's just like an assistant that's like presenting that information in a way that's like easy for them to make a decision faster. I think like in terms of like automation and what I think like if you look at the places where AI is sort of like most adopted right now, like let's say like the customer support, right? And like it's most directly in competition with humans. Like I think the general consensus is that you can sort of automate kind of like 20 to 30% of like, let's say your customer support tickets. These typically aren't the most complex tickets, right? They're typically things that like your tier 1 your tier 1 agents would be, you know, answering, not like your tier 3 like manager supervisor experience, but like tends to be like the simpler things like, hey, here's the page from our documentation, like, you know, over there that answers your question, or like that kind of stuff. And it also tends to be that, like, you know, in the time that, like, I think like there are not that many examples of this happening, because like in the time of like figuring this all out, you know, maybe that's like a year, you know, some of that headcount, and like typically orgs don't, or they're pretty aware of this and don't want to create the perception, so they'll sort of just wait for 20% of their like first line customer support agents to leave, and over time just kind of like gradually you know, sort of like gradually automate the tasks when that kind of like happens. I think like luckily we're pretty, people are while we've seen a lot of people concerned about this, in theory we actually have not seen as many concerns in practice, because it doesn't tend to be like an agent can do all of everybody's job in a department yet. It tends to right now be like that kind of thing, and then like, yeah, implementation takes time.
Helpful. Thank you.
All right, then I think we can do Gabe, and I will say, while I hand it over to you, Gabe, that I put in the chat also the link that you shared, Sam. So if anybody wants a digital copy or even a physical copy in, I think, North America and the EU, fill out the form and check your mailbox in just a few days, weeks, however long it takes. So there's an opportunity there to get your own book. Gabe, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Giannis, and a pleasure, Sam. And building on Eric's question, I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference between enterprise-grade agents and consumer-grade agents. Like, what's the state of the art? Like, if I went and built something with ChatGPT agent, how would that differ than from somebody building something with Mastra?
Yeah, I think sort of like in general, kind of the difference between enterprise. So like, here's how I guess I would define it first. Like, you know, anybody in any role in any company can, you know, assuming the company hasn't banned it, can sort of go to, you know, ChatGPT or Claude and kind of like input a lot of information and help them make a decision or answer a question or answer an email or whatever. And I think like in general, like the model companies see themselves, well, OpenAI in particular sees itself more as like a consumer company. Sort of like, then if you're like, hey, well, we want to actually put this in some sort of, create an agent and put it in some sort of a workflow, you're kind of wrapping LLMs, and then you're providing them a lot of things. You're providing them context. So now you need to like make tools that have integrations to wherever your data lives, whether it's in Google Drive or maybe some other, you know, system, and like identify like the right things to the right pieces of information to pull in, and also like configure permissions so it doesn't have access to things it shouldn't have, and also like, you know, security. There's a lot more there, but like then you need to like set up sort of like memory so that like, you know, in a conversational context, like it's kind of asking the right, like it sort of pulls in the history from like chats more if you're using that. Anyway, so then you sort of have to write these like evals, or maybe there's like a workflow where it's like, hey, there's these 3 separate like workflows that we're doing, and you have to do task 1 and then task 2 and then task 3 and task 4. Then like you're using evals to sort of, then you write evals to kind of make sure that it works appropriately, or that's giving appropriate output for a specific task. So like I would say like those are sort of the things when you, what is the difference between like an agent and an LLM? It's that an agent is sort of like, you know, incorporating some of these other bits that like you don't get in the kind of the raw model if I just like, you know, dump whatever information I want into ChatGPT.
Cool. Thank you, Sam. Perhaps here at the end, I can call out either Rob or Bill from AI123. I know you build a business around AI agents, but from a totally different angle than what Sam is doing at Master, or at least that's my understanding of the work that's being done. Bill, would you mind briefly saying hi and commenting on this new book, or Rob?
Hi. I think it's fantastic that you've invested the energy in writing the book, because this is changing so fast. You know, if the ink's dry on it, there's going to be a new innovation around how people are going to be adopting and using agents. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. And I can primarily think of what we've recently seen with the innovations around model context protocol in supporting agents making decisions. So agents, when you talk about an LLM, to me, that's just the cursory step. A large language model that you choose is going to help you with your reasoning engine, the weighted values, but it's when you then introduce all of the different skills that you get from an MCP service, you know, a Shopify or a CDP or a PIM. I'm just curious if that's come up in your dialogues, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about MCP. I think MCP, the model context protocol, is a great, you know, it has a lot of, think about it as for everyone that's like less familiar, you know, the core of what an agent capabilities are embedded in tools, which are just functions an agent can call, right? Then an agent can reason about the tools. You can also take the same tools, you can put them in an MCP server, and then you can expose that MCP server to someone externally. And so it's almost like a way of bundling tools that you can kind of that now you don't have to worry about like, hey, I have to build this like integration or whatever. So you can actually just give that MCP server to an agent, and it's almost like a bundling for tools. I mean, I think sort of like the idea of like decentralized integrations is really interesting. I also think about, you know, sort of famously like Gatsby is built on GraphQL, which became a very popular technology in the enterprise, kind of like to like, you know, do service interoperability. I don't know how much folks here have touched it, but like I kind of see MCP in that way as well. I think like in enterprises, there's going to be a large role for like in service-oriented architectures and backends for like them to interact with each other like agentically, right? Okay, if we want to do it programmatically, we can still use APIs and such and do normal microservice architecture. But if you want to do it agentically, then now you can use an MCP server and expose some of that functionality. So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. And a big thank you to you, Sam. We are right on time. I think it was a great discussion. Thank you very much, like Rob and several others have said, for finding the time to write this down in the industry on a topic that's changing so fast. But I think it makes it, for me, extra relevant to have a book like this so that we can agree at least that, okay, this is what the terms mean, agent versus LLM. How does MCP fit in? So congratulations, Sam, on the book. Great work.
Yeah, thanks. One more ask, like, you know, again, like if you read the book and you like it, just if you could just share somewhere on social that about this. I think one of the ways that like people find it is they just see their friends kind of like sharing about it. Like we love people to hear about it and download the copy or whatever. So like feel free to please if you do end up, you know, reading it and spending some time and liking it, like please share about that where, you know, other folks will hear about it.
That's great, Sam. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing many of you soon in Montreal. All the best.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.